Welcome to another Kingdom Voice broadcast with Apostle Lance Bellany, where faith meets action and intimacy with God comes alive in our daily walk. We are so thankful you joined us today. Your presence here is not by accident. It is part of God's divine appointment for your life. The kingdom of God is advancing, and you have a part in it. This broadcast is about equipping you, the believer, with truths of the kingdom, spiritual insight, and kingdom strategies to help you live with purpose, power, and victory. Each time we gather here, we explore the living word, uncover kingdom principles, and apply them to the challenges we face in our families, communities, and callings. Whether you're at home, at work, or on the move, this moment is set apart to connect and share our journey together and align with Elohim. So get ready to renew your mind and strengthen your spirit, because today, God will shift your perspective, fuel your faith, and launch you into your next season. Now, let's lean in, expect to receive, and prepare to be transformed. Here's Apostle Lance Bellany.
Well, God bless you. God bless you. Thank you so very much, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Thank you for being a part of the broadcast and making us a part of your engagement, your journey. So I really do appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your schedule, out of your time to be with us, to be here as we share with you truths of the kingdom from an apostolic perspective. And so thank you so very much. As we get started and as we get ready to share today, I want to invite all of you that are listening and that are part of the broadcast to share your thoughts, share your comments, share your insights. As I always say, I like to make this a dialogue, not a monologue, and I really want you to just give that feedback. We're going to talk today about some things that have been on my mind, some things that I have some pretty strong feelings and opinions about, and we're going to share that today. Hopefully, they will encourage you and give you a different perspective on these five things that I think are critical as a part of our daily living, as a part of our engagement with contemporary culture here in America. I think these things are critical. I think they're important to the vitality and the longevity of our country and of our republic, but it also of our society. I think it's important because these things that we're going to talk about are they have transcended time. They have transcended eras of our culture, and I think if we give the proper attention to these things, they will continue to promote a vibrant, a strong, a robust American culture. I think if we lean into some of the more nuanced or new approaches, I think at its core, it will present challenges to us. And so I want to encourage all of us, and I really want to ask you to share your thoughts, share your insights, and I would certainly be appreciative of that. Lastly, I want to say, for those of you that would like to reach out to us to be a part of the broadcast, we're going to share some information with you. Please feel free to connect with us and share with us your thoughts and your ideas around. Just to ask any questions, just to connect with us, to communicate with us. That would certainly help us and certainly give us a sense of where you are and what you would like to hear us talk about in the days to come. So thank you so very much. I really do appreciate it. Let's get started. I want to talk today about five things about the times we are living. I can talk about a lot of things along this line, but I want to point out five particular things that have piqued my interest. And so I'm going to share some things on the screen with you right now. Um, and it's important for us to recognize, you know, that these issues are impacting our lives and impacting who we are. So I want to talk about politics. I want to talk about education. I want to talk about social justice, masculinity, and then patriotism. I want to talk about all five of those things today. And I want to start with politics. I think in our society today, politics has become massively polarized. What I mean by polarized is politics, either you're this or you're that. They leave very little room for this and that. If you know what, if you can grab the gist of what I'm saying. Um, American politics is um, extremely polarized in our times. I mean, it 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 it's shaped by identity, emotion, media ecosystems. Do you listen to Fox or do you listen to CNN? Do you listen to MS Now? Do you listen to BBC? Do you all of these things come into play? And if you don't have a grounded sense of what's right, what's true, what's just, and I say those things explicitly because increasingly now those things have become blurred. What is right? Right is whatever I say it is. No, right is what God says. Okay. Right is what God is leading. Okay. All right. What's just, what's humane, what's right. All of those things now start to be blurred. And I want to talk about and really highlight the idea that politics in America have become extremely polarized. I have seen families ripped apart. That's polarization. I've seen friendships ripped apart. I've seen people lose their jobs behind politics. I've seen people, unfortunately, lose their lives behind politics. That's how divisive and polarized politics has become in America, and it's increasingly so because now we're even hearing politicians talk and use language and rhetoric that is just simply driving people to the edge. Okay, it's driving people that are unstable to do unfortunately illegal things. It's driving people that are impressionable to believe things that are just not sustainable. And so now the question becomes, how do we land and where do we land in terms of what's the right position to have and to hold around these issues of politics? We look at the present landscape. I mean, all you have to do is just turn on the television, turn on the radio, listen to podcasts on the internet, and you'll begin to hear some of the most vitriolic, mean-spirited, angry rhetoric that you can imagine, and people are spewing this across the airways around the topic and the subject of politics. And unfortunately for many, unfortunately for the U.S., politics has consumed us over the last 10 years since 2016. Actually, since 2012, 2008, actually, when President Obama took the White House, there was anger on one side. And then when President Trump took the White House, there was anger on the other side. And now they're angry at each other. And everybody's angry around politics. And you're wrong. No, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. Everybody's wrong. And that is just simply unsustainable. We cannot continue to drive down this path of political division in this country. We have to allow others to have their say and others to have their opinions, and we be okay with that. Now, we can, when I say okay, I don't mean I have to accept that. That means that I have to accept and should accept them with their opinions. That's what I'm saying. We need to be able to accept the fact that other people have different opinions than us. Each one of us ought to deliver the argument for our opinion. Yes, absolutely, unequivocally. But we have to accept the fact that others may not share our opinion, and that's okay. And other people need to be comfortable with the fact that I don't share their opinions. We can have that disagreement, but still go out to dinner, still invite each other over for family meals, still be able to go to school with one another and not fight and bite and devour one another. As a matter of fact, there's a passage of scripture that says, be careful lest when you bite and devour one another, you're not consumed one of another. We have to be good with the fact that someone does not see things the way that I do. Trust in institutions, the Supreme Court. I've listened to elected politicians not just disagree with the Supreme Court, but call the Supreme Court illegitimate. Call the Supreme Court stupid decisions. That's what they said about the Supreme Court. And now threatening on some sides of the political argument to dismantle, fundamentally restructure the Supreme Court because they didn't like a decision that the Supreme Court gave. Now, let me just stop for a second and articulate something that I believe is fundamentally problematic with the current rhetoric around the Supreme Court. You have one side of the argument declaring that we need to adjust the Supreme Court when we take power. Well, wait a minute. What happens if the party in power decides to do it now? That favors them. What happens then? Do you still want to pursue changing the Supreme Court? Or do you only want to do it because you think it's going to benefit you and not the masses, not the general public? Remember, everyone, I need you to understand this. Politically, this country is divided right down the middle. There are probably 50% conservative, 50% liberal, and some variation of liberalism and conservatism, whether you are a libertarian or whether you are socialist, whatever the case may be, there is about a 50-50 break. That says to me that the country is evenly divided and symmetrically divided around the political issues of the day. That means you're going to have about half the country believing or feeling one way and half the country feeling the other way. That's not necessarily bad. That simply means that we need a balanced approach to the political issues of the day. So 5 things that I want to point out about the times in which we're living is that we're living in political, in a political tightrope right now. And a tightrope not as in tension, but as a tightrope as in balance. We're balancing on a tightrope. And we need to be mindful of the fact that others may not share my opinion. I'm always mindful when I have political conversations to preface my conversations around the fact that, listen, I may not understand, I don't know rather what political persuasion you are, but this is my opinion. And I always start my conversations around those lines, because that gives room for them to share their opinion. And I'm okay with someone sharing their opinion. As a matter of fact, I enjoy talking to people with differing opinions. I don't get angry. I don't get upset. I don't get animated. I just simply listen and hear their perspective on it. And then I share mine. And now with a discourse in that manner, we can at least hear the perspective of someone else. It may not persuade me, I may not persuade them, but they've at least heard, and I've heard what they had to say. And good. Now we go on and about the business of hand. But unfortunately, in this political environment, If we disagree, we want to cancel people. We want to kill people. Okay. We want to get people fired. We want to close businesses down. I mean, it is unbelievable how intolerant we have become as it pertains to the political environment in which we live. So I wanted to share those thoughts around politics. Again, American politics is increasingly shaped by ideology, emotion, and media ecosystems rather than shared facts or institutions. We talked about, the separations of power, the Constitution of the United States, the Declaration of Independence, the founding documents, the Supreme Court, the legislative, the judicial, the executive branches of our government, separate but equal. All of those things attenuate back to the founding principles of our society, of our country, of our government. And those things have stood the test of time: the Vietnam War, World War I and II, communism, socialism, capitalism, all of the above, and have settled in on an approach to government that has allowed us to be the most powerful country this world has ever seen. World as in earth, the most powerful country that has ever graced the face of this earth. There is something to be said about that. Yes, we're young. Yes, we haven't seen a lot, but one thing we have seen is that this country, as it has been formed and has developed to date, stands as the single greatest power on the earth, on the planet. And it is all due to, I believe, our unwavering, enduring, unshakable faith in the one creator of all things, God himself, God themselves. I believe that to be the case. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back, and we'll keep moving.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join our conversation as we journey together into the kingdom. If you've ever wondered how you can support what we are doing here at Rock of Truth Ministries and our Kingdom Voice broadcast, here's how. Please share the link to this and other broadcasts on your social media platforms. As we try to reach more people with the kingdom message, it helps when we can get a personal introduction to your circle of friends. This introduction makes it far more likely for them to give us a chance to share what God is saying through us. If you have not done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@ROTruthMIN. Thanks again for joining us today. Now let's get back to Apostle Bellany and today's next topic. Here's Apostle Bellany.
So, as we continue to discuss the issue of the things that I think are that we have to address in our current environment. I think many times we look at politics as a clear concern, as a clear issue in our daily living. You turn on the television, the radio, you get on the internet, everybody's talking about politics and so forth. But I think there's also another real issue that we have to address, because this is alarming. I think this has even greater implications than just than politics. Politics plays a role in this, but I think this is problematic if we don't fix this issue right now, and that is education. I think it's important for us to understand that that our education system and our education in this country is in trouble. It is in trouble. There is no question about that. The problem that I have with education is not our ability to educate our children, but our willingness to educate our children in a way that benefits them, their future, and the future of this country. I absolutely believe that agendas that are not beneficial to the proper education of our children, to the furthering of continued progress and improvement of our country, have taken hold of our education system. I believe our education system is driven by agendas that are just simply bad for the future of this country, bad for our children, bad for just having an educated populace and an educated electorate. One of the things that I've seen, and I remember, and old enough to remember when the Department of Education was formed. I remember when that, I think it was under President Jimmy Carter, where we formed the Department of Education. Great idea, a centralized area where we can focus what's good for education. Well, that didn't quite work out because the standard of education, the ability of our children to produce against the performance of other industrialized nations have gone down instead of increased under the Department of Education. But it has become such a main part and a part of the standard rhetoric of this country and of politicians that now we don't want to get rid of it because no one can tell you why we shouldn't get rid of it. So let's look at the data. The data is telling us that our children are digressing instead of progressing under the Department of Education. We've decentralized, we have centralized education to Washington, D.C., and letting Washington, D.C. push out whatever they want and believe is best for New Iberia, Louisiana, or Corpus Christi, Texas, or Quinter, Kansas. We've decided that some central education organization knows what's best for children in local communities. I absolutely, categorically, unequivocally disagree with that. I believe local educators, my mother was an educator, my daughter, my nephews and nieces are educators. I categorically disagree that some centralized body knows what's best for some local community in terms of educating their children. I believe standards ought to be given and standards ought to be shared, but the responsibility for implementing those standards should be given to the local community. What is best? What is the global community doing in education? I think that would be a good function for the Department of Education so that we can always keep up and know how we should be performing against these standards globally. But the responsibility for implementing those standards or not implementing a standard should be and always remain for the local community to handle. And if Corpus Christi is performing better than Lake Charles, Louisiana, then Lake Charles, Louisiana ought to be able to learn from what Corpus Christi is doing, take whatever is applicable to Lake Charles, Louisiana, and then begin to implement those things in the local community. The U.S. education, the U.S. is debating not just what students learn, but who gets to decide: parents, states, educators, or political actors. And I think right now what we're seeing is being led by political actors, okay, and educators that have no sense of the local needs and thus are forcing practices, educational practices on the local community, and it is an abject failure. It's simple. The numbers don't lie. Okay? But liars manipulate numbers. The stats, the data is clear that we have suffered a decline in education, especially in the inner city, which is the area that these political actors supposedly are claiming to want to help. Listen, I am absolutely persuaded that when it comes to education, people are not interested in educating children. They're interested in furthering an agenda of whatever making that they want. Education is on the decline. We have to turn it around. And the only way we're going to turn it around is that we have to make some tough decisions. And I think one of the toughest decisions that we are going to have to make and are making right now is either the abolishment of the Department of Education at the national level, or we have to decide that we're going to restructure the way the Department of Education handles and influences education in America. The Department of Education is not a constitutional entity. I want you to understand that. It is a created entity by the executive branch back in the 1970s. It's a created entity. And just like it was created, it can be abolished without constitutional amendment, but simply by an effort on the part of the executive branch to say, we're going to do something different. We're going to change the way we educate our children. And hopefully we can get it right this time, because it worked. It worked from the Great Depression. It worked through the Civil Rights era. It worked until we decided that we were going to get political. And once we got political, agendas set in, and now we are declining. We are declining. Look up any type of numbers, statistics on education in America, and you'll see that we have declined from the time that we implemented the Department of Education to now. We have declined. Digital learning, AI, the workforce shifts are forcing schools to rethink the purpose of education beyond standardized testing. And that really is the crux of the matter, this standardized testing. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when standardized testing began to be a thing. Instead of the local testing, they wanted standardized testing. And now teachers, instead of teaching kids to train them and educate them and teach them how to think, they began to teach them how to pass the test. Why? Because passing that test was connected to money. Money funded the local education district. Rather than local taxes, they were getting federal money now. And that money was attractive. So what did they decide? They gravitated toward the money, not necessarily toward what was best for the children, but they gravitated toward the money. And once that money started to talk, education focus went out the door. It became about the money. I was listening, had a good friend of mine many, many years ago, rest his soul, Brother Ronnie Johnson, out of Douglas, Georgia. And Ronnie was a staunch advocate for educating our children, not political, but educating our children. And I'll never forget, Ronnie was telling me, Mr. Johnson was telling me, he said, Lance, let me tell you something. If you want to change the local community, you have to attack the money. And for every child that is absent from school, they lose money. And the reason they began to go with in-school suspensions, now listen to this. Sometimes a child's behavior dictates suspension. But you know why they went to in-school suspension? Because as long as that child was out of school for that day, they lost money. So what did they do? It wasn't about for the education, for the betterment, for the well-being of the schools, the students, and that particular child that was behaving badly. It was about them keeping that money. And what did they do? They came up with in-school suspension. So now, instead of the child being out of school, they're in school, counted present, but they're in in-school suspension. Make it make sense to me. Make it make sense. Inequities in funding, access, and opportunity continue to mirror broader social divides, especially across race and class. When you start looking at the school district should be led by people that have the education of our children at heart. And that is the single greatest priority for our children, is that they are the center of our efforts regarding education. If it doesn't benefit the children, let's not involve ourselves in it. Let me say this as I get ready to bring this part of the discussion. And by the way, if you have any thoughts or comments, I would love to see your thoughts and have you share your thoughts with us on. I can see them. Your comments come in live on the screen, so please feel free to share your thoughts and your comments. But education now is becoming about social agendas, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. You've got social experiments being foisted upon our children with impunity. No one suffers for a bad idea that they've levied upon our children in schools. And I'll give you some examples that I absolutely, unapologetically believe is absolute lunacy. They're now in some education areas are teaching children, because of at the behest of the National Education, sexuality, same-sex marriage, transgenderism. All of these things are being taught in some school districts. In your more liberal school districts, your more conservative school districts are fighting these issues tremendously and successfully. But we've got to get to the point where those types of social agendas and social experiments are not for educating our children. Our children ought to be educated in science, engineering, math, technology, the arts, the languages. Those are the things that we ought to, critical thinking, problem solving. Those are the things we ought to be educating our children with. But instead, we have these social experiments being foisted upon these educational districts, and by, unfortunately, some educational districts, to the detriment of our children. One of the things that I heard during the last presidential election, and I thought was a fantastic idea, yet to be proven, but still I thought it was a fantastic idea. When you look at education in this country, I want you to stop and think about it. It is commonplace now for a university to charge a student $150,000, $200,000, $300,000 for an education. And that student, of course, can't pay for it. It's the family members of that student that are paying for it. To get an education in a subject matter that cannot pay them enough money upon graduation to pay for the education they just got to perform and practice in that field of study or in that field of industry. Let me break it down. An education that costs you $350,000 at a prestigious university, the requisite industrial career associated with that education can only pay you $100,000 a year as an income base. Now, how do you pay off a $300,000 education, making $100,000 in your career field, and live and take care of family, raise a family, buy a house, have a standard of living? you'll be paying off that education degree for 30 years. Why does it cost so much to have an education when you're not teaching me anything more than what was taught back in the early formation of our country, the 60s and 70s, where an education costs you less than half of that? Make it make sense. It doesn't. Education has to be addressed. And again, education is not a constitutional issue in this country. It is not based in the Constitution. It is decided, or it has been decided upon by our leaders, our governmental leaders, that education was an important part of the development of our country. And I agree with that. But not to the degree that it's going to cost us so much money to where we can't even sustain a gain in education at the higher level. I'm going to say something and then we'll move on. I find it extremely challenging that in the effort to promote college education, we demonized or we degraded the trade skills, things like a mechanic, air conditioning, carpentry, electrician, plumber, millwrights, what we call the trades. Okay. It's amazing to me that, and again, I'm old enough to remember when we diverged from a healthy balance of both to an overemphasis of one of them, which happened to be the college education. I remember when the trades were taught in the public high schools and in the local community colleges. The trades were a major emphasis. I remember when I was in high school, we had carpentry as a shop class. We had auto mechanic. We had mechanical drafting. All of these things are considered the trades. And they were emphasized. And by the time I graduated, and shortly after my graduation, they had completely done away with the trades and the shop classes in the high school. Everything was focused on the college education. Now it costs what costs you very little, already tax-paid dollars in the local education system, in the local high school. You could take that and go parlay that into a career after high school. Now I got to go to college, pay $400,000 to go get an education, or $300,000 to go get an education that can only pay me $100,000. If I were to go get a carpentry, a plumber's, an HVAC degree today, right now, I could go make $100,000 and only pay roughly $20,000, $30,000 for that education. If I paid that much, probably more like about $6,000 to $10,000 for that education to go pay to get a career that's going to pay me in excess of $100,000 in the right position. Make it make sense to me. They sold us a bill of goods that just simply did not deliver on the promises that they made. And that's something that we are absolutely suffering from today. I want to talk about social justice, and it's important because that's a big topic. And as a matter of fact, I'm writing an expose on racism and sexism, and I'm going to talk about that at length once I get that expose written, where everything for many people are seen through the lenses of race. If you're Black, you're vulnerable, and you are the victim, and you need reparations, and you need all of these things. Okay, if you're white, you're privileged, and you had it easy, and you're advantaged, and therefore we need to penalize you because you've had those advantages. That's a race to the bottom. That is an abject race to the bottom. And what I mean by race to the bottom is that nobody benefits from that kind of thinking. Although you have elected officials, elected politicians, you have pundits, and you have social activists that are making careers on what I like to call race hustling. Okay. Are there racial issues that we need to tackle in this country? Yes. And there will always be. Why? Because we're a melting pot. We are a diverse society and culture that have existed with each other better than any other diverse culture like it in the history of humanity. Yes, we have our issues socially, but we tackle our issues. Now the question becomes, what's the most effective way to tackle these issues? There are ways, and many people are advocating ways to tackle the issues. But look at the results of those ways. Look at the results of those efforts to attack these issues. Are they promoting the well-being of our society, or are they promoting an agenda that meets with someone's own personal desires? I think the latter. Social justice movements now operate in a hybrid space, part grassroots activism, parts digital mobilization, reshaping how change is demanded. Meaning that, listen, again, because of social justice, if you don't agree with me, you are the enemy, not having a different opinion, not let's sit down and talk about dialogue. Come now, let us reason together, saith the Lord. No, none of that. It is, you're the evil one. You're to be destroyed. You're to be destroyed at the expense of my agenda. And unfortunately, that only leads to biting and devouring one another and ultimately consuming one another. There is always room for dialogue, for negotiations, for discussions around what is the best way to solve the problem. Because if you're not willing to listen to the best way to solve the problem, you're going to come up with an inferior way that will only engender further division. We have to allow open dialogue to discuss how, and listen, I am conservative. I am conservative. I don't make any apologies about that. Okay, I don't make any apologies about that. But I will say that I want to hear from non-conservative opinions about this. And it can't simply just be, they're bad, we're good, that's the end of it. No. And likewise from the conservative side, I draw distinction on many issues around conservative viewpoints, around racism, social justice, sexism, genderism. I draw distinctions because I don't always agree with the talking points, if you will, for lack of a better word, from the conservative side, because I think it's a lot more nuanced in many instances than what many conservatives want to think that it is. It's a lot more nuanced, and we have to deal with the nuances. Conversations about race, gender, and power are increasingly framed around systems rather than individual prejudices. And that's a fact. Now, what I mean by that is we want to make America a racist nation. America is not a racist nation. I categorically disagree with that. And many social pundits and social activists, especially on the liberal side, and particularly from the African-American side, want to make America a racist country. There are racists in America, no question about that. But America is not a racist country. My God, we elected a black president. We have black representation on the Supreme Court. We have black representation in corporate America, in banking, in education. We have corporate African-American representation all across this country. 60, 70 years ago, that was not the case. America isn't a racist country. America has racists that operate in this country, and we can deal with them on an individual, prejudicial basis. But we need to stop calling America a racist country, because it isn't. That is just simply not true. You said, Apostle, you're splitting hairs. No, I'm not. I am being factually accurate. I am being factually accurate. And as a result of that, America has given African Americans the greatest opportunities in this world. African Americans live better than any place on this planet in America. We have greater opportunities. We can become billionaires. We can become trillionaires. We can have successful lives. We can raise a family. We can live in a lavish home. We can broadcast on the internet anytime we get ready. America isn't a racist country. America has to deal with racist people in this country. But now that comes from both sides of the equation. Don't act like black folk can't be racist. Don't act like Hispanic folk can't be racist. Asians, Indians, Native Americans, and yes, Caucasians. Don't act like none. All of us have our issues with racism. But that's at the individual level. At the national level, at the culture, country level, nation level, America allows you to go to the courts to get relief for your grievance. If someone has racially wronged you, you have grievance that you can file, and you can go to the courts and get that grievance addressed. That's what makes us such a powerful nation, and a nation that is not plagued, that isn't a racist nation. Now you got African countries that are racists. I mean, just look around. You have plenty of countries that are racist at their core, making laws that deny other races the opportunity to participate in the social construct of that country. We've got our challenges, no question about it, but we also unequivocally are the greatest nation this world has ever seen. And I'm glad to be an American. Give me America. I'll go visit anywhere you want to go, but give me America. That's why people to the tune of 20+ million wanted to get here. Do you see Americans fleeing and flocking to that level to go other places? No. Because they know this is the land of opportunity. I want to talk about this, and before we get into masculinity, I want to just really focus on, it's important for us to have men and masculinity in our presence. Okay?
We hope you have been enjoying.
It's important for us to have, what's the word I'm looking for? strong male presence, a defender. You see, we want to make masculinity no different than femininity. No, masculinity is not femininity, never will be, cannot be. It was created not to be. There are simply innate characteristics of each of them that will never let them be the same. Women are not as strong as men. Women think different than men. Women see the world different than men, and that's a good thing. That is a good thing. Only in America, where we have so conflated the understanding of masculinity and femininity, that now you have women thinking that they can compete with men physically and getting just absolutely obliterated. You have some people now deciding that they want men to compete with women, and a man can be a woman just because he decides that he's a woman, and a woman can be a man just because she decides that she thinks she's a man, and all of this. And I'm going to call it what I see it to be: absolute lunacy. Absolute lunacy. Women are women and men are men. We have our unique identities and we need to embrace them for what they are. If you feel that you are a woman as being a man, then there is something wrong with that. Let's call it what it is. There is something wrong with that. Okay? And we need to address that, yes, but we're not going to accommodate that. I certainly won't. You're a man. You may need help, but you're a man. I'm not going to indulge your fantasy to the expense of my sanity, or rather at the expense of my sanity. I'm going to treat you accordingly. Now, we can talk about some of the challenges that you're facing, yes, but I'm not going to indulge your fantasies. This is a real issue. Social justice, excuse me. When we start talking about masculinity, it's important for us to recognize American masculinity is undergoing a cultural renegotiation, balancing traditional expectations with, quote, new methods of emotional openness and shared responsibility. My wife is feminine. I've been married for almost 41 years now. My wife is feminine. I am masculine. We see the world differently. I want to solve problems. She wants to care. Okay? It's just one example of how men and women tend to be different. Okay? She's nowhere near as strong as I am. And that's not uncommon. That is universal. Women are not as strong as men, period. End of discussion. Our muscular structures are different. Men cannot have babies, period. I don't care how many men get together. They can't produce a child. Women can't produce a child without a man, but they can produce a child. They can carry a child. Women just are built different than men, psychologically, emotionally, physiologically. Men and women are different, and that manifests itself in an unlimited number of ways. This is why it's important for us to understand and recognize that masculinity and femininity are vital. If we blur the lines and continue to blur the lines between masculinity and femininity, we will breed confusion, and the enemy from without won't have to do anything because we'll destroy ourselves from the inside. Public discourse, public discourse often polarizes masculinity as either toxic or under attack, leaving little room for healthy, nuanced definitions. Again, a man and a woman. I remember during the latest round of political appointments, many candidates for that were appointed were asked questions around what is a man and what is a woman, because the lines were blurred. Democrats did not want to define what a woman was because they didn't want to offend whatever they wanted to offend. The Republicans and the conservatives were pressing them on defining what a woman was, because everybody understood what a woman was, and it was such a mass confusion and mass debate around that issue. Utter silliness that certain politicians would not define what a woman is, yet they champion the rights of being a woman. Make that make sense. If you can't define what a woman, how do you champion the rights of women? It just goes to show you the silliness that was pervasive during this recent period. Just pure silliness. Well, listen, I'm amazed at how some of these issues that we face in our society today are pervasive to the point that it just often just doesn't make sense to hold some of the positions that are being held in light of simple common sense. Just natural common sense. What is a man? What is a woman? What is masculinity? Okay. Education. You know, it doesn't hold a lot of, it doesn't stand on solid ground in many instances, some of the arguments that are being made. So I would leave with this as we get ready to close. I would say this: it's important for us to recognize and understand that when we start looking at what direction should I take? How should I move in this direction? What direction should I move? I would say to you, and for those of you that are listening to this broadcast, I would say to you that it's important for you to land or to start with an intimate relationship with God. Spend time with God and let them, mother and father, let them tell you and speak to you and guide you, okay, about whatever. And as you encounter things that in your daily living, let your intimacy with God lead you to your position and understanding about that thing you just encountered. 100 times out of 100, 100% of the time, it's going to be based in common sense, the direction you should go. It's going to be based in a balanced approach, the direction that you should go, or you should take, the position that you should take. Okay. I try not to be led by emotion as much as I am led by what makes sense, what leads to real positive change. And one of the things that my experience has afforded me is the ability to have a basis of reference. I've seen enough to know what has yielded positive change, good change, and what has yielded just change for the sake of change and yielded no real fruit at all. As a matter of fact, in many instances, it took us backwards. And because I have seen that, I am comfortable in assessing what the real change is. Amen. and or the real outcome of that change is. So that being said, I want to thank all of you. I know I was ranting a bit today, but I want to thank all of you. I really appreciate you taking a few minutes to share and to be a part of the broadcast today. And I really want to thank you for the time that you've taken with us here on the broadcast. And so, with that being said, I want to say, if you will, join us again next week as we continue to share with you truths of the kingdom from an apostolic perspective. And until then, I want to ask you to be well, be blessed, and we'll see you again next Sunday.
Thank you for joining us today for the Kingdom Voice broadcast. Your presence made all the difference. Please know that we don't take your presence or participation lightly. We know you could have chosen to be any a number of places this morning, but you chose to be with us, and we are so grateful. For those of you that would give a gift of any size, Apostle Bellany would like to give you a copy of his book that he co-authored with Apostle Vincent Poole and his wife JoLynn Poole, titled Kingdom 101, Revelational Truths of the Kingdom of God. For a gift of any size, simply email us at lcbellany@yahoo.com, and we will rush out a copy to you. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you again next Sunday morning at 10:30 Central Standard Time. God bless you, and thank you for your support. Thank you so much for